sight. The strandings o' the Firth in the dead o' the night. They came in their hundreds, the dolphin, the whale, driven to shallows with a sorrowful tale. The learned men muttered on nets and no noise, but the seas bear a tally that none can disguise. So order half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men. They'll talk all the weather, they'll talk all the storm. They'll scribble their numbers to keep with the norm. But the count only rises, the carcasses show a reckoning carry wherever tides go. From Raasay to Moray, the tidings run grim. The porpoise and mink now drift at the brim. Yet silence in council halls buries the cost, for silver and power would sooner them lost. So order half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men. And if ye should wander the shoreline at dawn, where once the great singers and dancers had gone, remember the silence, remember the sound. The strandings o' the Firth, where the warning is found. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men. So order a half and a half at the bar. From Fukushima's waters, the fallout sails far. Clap hands on the table, let everyone ken. The strandings o' the Firth mark the folly o' men.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show for everyone tonight. Start off with some otherworldly news that I've been tracking for quite a while. Navy officer claims the crew saw a football field-size UFO underwater. They saw a football field, so it's 300 by 100 feet underwater. Apparently it can travel at the speed of sound. Speed of sound. Hey Siri, what's the speed of sound? How fast?
The speed of sound through air at ground level is approximately 760 miles per hour, or approximately 1,000.
So 760 miles per hour underwater. The whole crew felt the shockwave against the submarine, apparently. That's why we should take all the nuclear subs out of the ocean, right there. A senior U.S. Navy officers claimed his crew witnessed a massive, unidentified underwater object racing through the ocean at around 200 miles per hour. What happened to my graphics that time? I set it at 200 times regular speed, or double regular speed. I was having a hard time finding my graphics because we had changed things around a number of months ago. A UFO like no other. There's around 800 so-called UFO sightings with the military. The one under the ocean intrigues me because I've heard a lot about it over the years. A very high-ranking member of the Navy described some underwater experiences with something that was doing 200 miles per hour underwater. It was as big as a football field, and that's no fish. So there was different reports. This one was at 200 miles per hour. 200 miles per hour. He told the television that no man-made craft could reach such underwater speeds. Hey man, just kidding. And that was without our technology, no. The best we have is probably the high 30s. Well, classified, it probably hits 50, right? Maybe 60. But 200 miles per hour is pretty extraordinary. His remarks suggested whatever was seen moving nearly 6 times faster than the most advanced military submarines or torpedoes. Now, I got good collection of those reports of military seeing objects in the ocean that were extraordinary. These encounters, and allegedly they've been here for 1 million years, whoever they are, making them even harder to explain. Allegedly they have a contract, a memorandum of understanding, so to speak, with the governments worldwide to be left alone. Now, examine reports on unidentified submerged objects and might be operable both in the sky and under the sea. Now, I've heard those accounts too. I'm not a big UFO buff, but I've been gathering up over the years what I consider credible sources, like hard to refute stories. I shouldn't use credible sources, I guess, but hard to refute stories for myself. And lately there's been a couple of big revelations. He dismissed the idea these objects might belong to any known defense programs. Why would we risk multi-million-dollar apparatus? Why would we put something in the air around our best pilots that could have a crash? That would be stupid. The claims echo those of Bob McWire, a professor intelligence officer that worked aboard the USS Hampton. He experienced a similar encounter while on duty, hearing something whiz by the submarine at speeds faster than sound, 760 miles per hour. The sonar tracked the unidentified object traveling faster than the speed of sound through the water, a feat no torpedo or known craft can achieve. And the sub-sonar picked it up. It blew by us. They kept the secret for decades due to the classified nature of his naval work. It is mine to tell whoever I want they blew it, referring to the Navy's failure to properly document the event. He only came forward when the Pentagon began its probe into hundreds of UFOs and USOs reports. He recalled how a person with knowledge of onboard systems confirmed something had sped past their submarine faster than the speed of sound. The engagement lasted only seconds, which is what you would expect. Right, the wake would last a few seconds, but at that speed it's going past you so quick. That's what kind of you would expect. It was so distinct that everybody on board felt the shock wave. Yeah, well, that's not somebody you want to get upset with you. Yeah, it's going to be pretty hard to maneuver some ship that can do those types of speed. That's the first time I've heard of big speeds. The story gained traction after 2019 video surfaced showing the USS Omaha tracking a glowing orb off the coast of San Diego. The object hovered briefly, plunged into the water, disappeared completely. It splashed. A crew member can be heard shouting in the footage. And the crazy Pentagon is examining 800 unexplained encounters, including those beneath the ocean. Both McWire and Butchett argued that these sightings prove humans may not be alone, or that unknown technology is operating in Earth's most remote environments. And I have some pretty crazy stories from top government officials about entities, about so-called aliens, about portals from CERN, you name it, where there was a entity come out of a portal created by CERN, which is apparently why it was created in the first place, to create these so-called portals. To create those so-called portals. And so they can just... So apparently an entity came through a portal that was open briefly and took a scarf with the entity, we'll call it a him right now for lack of better description, and took a scarf with him when he went back through the portal. That's my personal portal right there. When I go on vacation, I go through there, and I end up in exotic planets for a couple of minutes. But it feels like days when I get back, so you should all get one. I made mine with sake. Sake brewers from Fukushima promote their products in New York City. This is not the first time, by the way. The Japanese government, the Fukushima prefectural government, opened a sake shop for wine, sake, from the Fukushima prefecture itself, because nobody would buy it anywhere else. So the government in the United States allowed them to open a sake shop in New York. It's a quite disturbing story, too, on top of that. Because Fukushima is not a game, right? The radioactive fallout is not... I don't know. You only get what the story tells you. Now, I got a lot of videos on this stuff. Extensive testimony, and it's pretty credible listening to some of it. We have ex-military or active military talking about alien crafts. Sake, well, like whatever took down the Twin Towers is not... We haven't seen that technology before. And we really haven't seen it after. Sake brewers from Fukushima promote their products in New York City. Professionals from the hospitality industry in New York City got a chance on Wednesday to taste some of the best sake from Fukushima. There is no best sakes from a nuclear wasteland. This is crazy, Doc. Every kilogram of soil in Fukushima prefecture was around 1.4 million atoms per kilogram of just gamma. So this is 2000. This is Futaba. Evacuated Fukushima town begins efforts to have product restrictions lifted, but nobody's living there. People went back in there to farm land. This is how crazy this industry. And calling it crazy is being pretty polite. Sake brewers from Fukushima prefecture promote their products in New York City. 11 radioactive sake brewers from the region took part in a promotional event, which was organized by the prefectural government. By Fukushima government. Again, this is separate from the last time. One man working at a cocktail bar in Brooklyn said the event was an excellent opportunity to present some great offerings to our customers as well as to support Fukushima. So this is an insane narrative where you have to support the farmers so they can kill millions of people with their radioactive food. Like it's you're talking about a Twilight Zone. This is Twilight Zone stuff. Like, we covered the whole planet just with cesium, for instance. In Canada, was a million to 10 million atoms. So how bad is it going to be in a nuclear wasteland where they picked up 30 million one-ton bags? He said New Yorkers were well aware of the nuclear disaster. They're not well aware at all. Very, very, very few people are well aware. And all of them comes here on a regular basis. It's a very complicated story. Organized by the government, support Fukushima. Why should you support a nuclear wasteland for? You can support it by not buying their products so they get out of there and protect themselves and they don't poison millions of people every year. Doesn't that sound like a better idea? New Yorkers who came to the event told me the sake from Fukushima is delicious. You can't taste radiation, typically. You can in certain quantities. You only need a single atom. You put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle. You get the wrong one in your body, and your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. And so it's an instant adverse side effects. And then eventually it builds a tumor around it to contain it. Your body does with white blood cells. Oh no, it's delicious. And that's somehow science, is it? And Kobayashi said, I think the name Fukushima has a lot of brand value. A lot of brand value. A total disrespect is what the nuclear industry has for you and your friends and your families and your hopes and your dreams. An absolute 100% catastrophic contempt. Like this, the emissions from a nuclear reactor fuel pool, for instance, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The reactor cores that are in the fuel pools are still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. There's no containment, and these things are surrounded by farms. And so you have to appreciate they've been using farms to poison you for 80 years. This is an agenda. The nuclear industry is a death cult. Right? This is a death cult. There's no other way to describe it. Think about how if a single reactor breaks down, you might have to evacuate your country. Doesn't matter if you're in Japan or United States or Canada or Bolivia, whatever. You got to evacuate your country. Should be hundreds of thousands of people working. So if your coal plant breaks down or your gas plant breaks down or your oil plant breaks down, do you got to get hundreds of thousands of people to work furiously for every day for years and years? No. I believe the country would be evacuated if number 4 pool reactor breaks down. Well, it did. Reactor 2 completely liquefied. Also, reactor 3 done the same thing. Reactor 4 done the same thing. So this industry is pretty rotten. So why would you get sake in a prefecture where there's 1.4 million atoms per kilogram detected in worm feces 60 kilometers from the meltdown, where they're getting the rice for their sake? Why would you? How can you say? They say they know about, every New Yorker knows about the nuclear accident, but you wouldn't have that there if every New Yorker was aware of what Fukushima actually was. $1.373 million. 373, did I say? Yeah, 373, 1,373,000. Some zeros, Dana. Okay, so that's per kilogram. Right, that's per kilogram in the worm's feces. So multiply that by a square meter. So 66.6 kilograms to get a square meter. It's 91 million atoms of just, and they're only acknowledging cesium on top of that. Every organism Has Fukushima radioactive fallout contaminated all water, all species, all trees, all farms, all insects, all aquifers, etc., 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 worldwide? Boo, yeah, man. You know they have. It's such an evil industry. It's hard to. Its industry is death. Its product is mass death, mass omnicide, mass extermination of all species. A Fukushima prefectural official who organized the event said the United States is the largest export market for sake. He said the local government plans to hold more events of this kind to expand sale of radioactive alcohol from a nuclear wasteland. This is evil. The whole country should be gone nuts on getting this banned. And they get a white Anglo-Saxon news presenter, scumbag presenter, and he got the tie so tight to his neck his arm was choking. And his job is to sell you that lie. Sake brewers from Fukushima promote their products in New York City with the help from governments. The government of Fukushima Prefecture going there and spending the money means you're going to poison a lot of people because they got a lot of push. The New York allowing that to happen, somebody should sue the New York town councils and local government for allowing that to happen. It's impossible to produce any products in the Fukushima prefecture, let alone Japan, without it being catastrophically radioactive. It's impossible. It can't be done. And so they find useful idiots, and then they quote them. They dress like characters out of a comic book because their life is so pathetic. Right? And they hire Americans to stand there and pass it out. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. It's a nuclear wasteland. And these are usually restaurant chain suppliers and stuff like that, these people you're seeing. They get invited there. And they're so evil, there's nothing they won't do. And he says, oh yeah, no, it's so good. Now that community they're talking about, we know for a fact is a nuclear wasteland. But that's not the only spot. It won the 2025 U.S. National Sake Appraisal, the Gold Award winner. Do you know they win all the awards wherever they go? Quite a coincidence, isn't it? You got to be exceptionally evil to do the things they're doing. There's no need to poison people. There will be no renaissance in Fukushima Prefecture or surrounding prefectures. It's a nuclear wasteland. You shouldn't have had nuclear in the first place. And poisoning everybody worldwide by continuing to grow food and produce products from that place is just unconscionable. It's impossible for anybody to have any respect for you whatsoever. You have crossed all rationale and lines. There is no justification for growing food in a nuclear wasteland. And then coming to the United States and setting up these distribution centers for food from a nuclear wasteland. And the world sits there and lets it happen. The universities, of course, participate in it. Very disappointing. It's very disappointing. Yeah, we got. I usually shows there's a video from a few years back, 5 or 6 years back, where they were giving people like these little, you get those little milk cartons, those little 1 pint or something. They were giving people, handing them out, and people were guzzling them down. I know there were people there protesting in front of that the last time that they set up. Now they're planning on coming back over and over and over. And because you can't taste it or smell it or hear it or feel it or touch it or perceive it, then that emboldens them to be even more evil. You got to realize this is a country that has no respect for women, for starters. They're brutal on the women in Japan. It's really something. They're 100% objects. Like a young female on the buses in Japan traveling every day is getting brutalized. State tort liability for nuclear incidents. So everybody's familiar most likely with the Price-Anderson, which is gives the nuclear industry a pass and puts the liability into the taxpayers. Right now, you can only sue them for like $1 billion or $1.5 billion, but they can do hundreds of billions of dollars of damage. And so if they, like, there's no insurance companies will insure the nuclear power plants because an accident could put you out of business. A big insurance company, it will break all the big insurance companies combined. Before last year, federal appellate courts consistently looked at federal safety regulations defined as standard of care in tort suits related to nuclear contamination or personal injury. This is the only way they can exist is if they can't be held accountable. Like, you shouldn't be able to use radiation on people in hospitals. It's absurd. It was radioactive follow to put them in hospital with cancers in the first place, and now you're going to use more radiation? It's demented. It's demented to do something like that to a human or an animal. It's demented. Increased liability risk if the state standards apply. If the 8th Circuit approach stands, because they're going to take it to the 8th Circuit, nuclear energy providers, contractors, transportation companies, waste handlers may face heightened tort liability under strict liability or negligence theories, even when they comply with the non-regulatory commission's regulations. These are degenerates. On top of that, the NRC are just hideous pro-nuclear monsters, have a whole legacy of being monstrosity, criminal beyond anything that ever sat in a jail. Tort claims could throw a big wrench, hopefully, turn on the jury's judgments as to what safety measures are reasonable. There is no safe levels of radiation. The fuel pools from all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging radiation directly into the environment. There is no containment. Once the fuel goes through the chain reaction of splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses, but it's under enormous pressure, 1,000 or 2,000 pounds per square inch, everything else. When you take it out and put it in the fuel pools, it's still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. And every year you're putting more in the fuel pool and you're releasing more into the environment forever. It never goes away. And attacks everything with replicating cells. The industry has no right to exist whatsoever in any capacity. Potential implications for a renaissance in nuclear power. You have the same gigawatts right now as you did in the 90s. There is no nuclear renaissance. And the way they're getting away with keeping the numbers fairly high right now is they're running these old, brittle reactors at a very high rate in order to try to maintain their share of the power worldwide, because once they start losing those percentages, then the world starts turning on them quicker. The case takes on greater significance due to the recent market driven need for base load. Yeah, geothermal will solve all your problems, for goodness sakes, which has stimulated the rebirth of a nuclear industry. It hasn't. There is no nuclear renaissance. There is no small modular reactors. There is no micro reactor. There's no fusion reactors. There's no applications into the regulatory agencies even for the licenses. They're not accumulating supply chains. They don't have the welders. They don't have the infrastructure. There's no indication that there's no posturing, for goodness sakes. It's just nonsense that's published constantly to invoke a response from unsuspecting investors who ultimately will lose a large percentage of their investment because it's a Ponzi scheme. They artificially inflate it for a few weeks. The bottom falls out of it. They sell their cheap stocks and steal the new investors' profits. An increased threat of liability could hamper new projects. So if you bypass Price Anderson and actually hold them accountable for what they're doing, they don't want to do it because they can't afford to pay it. They'll lose all their profits, and then they'll be in the hole and have to liquidate their assets to pay restitution. And it might be even now, at that point, if they're not protected by Price Anderson, they might very well end up in court and they might end up in jail for the crimes they're committing. There was two sisters' allegations that they developed cancer from exposure to radioactive contamination linked to a former nuclear waste storage site. The nuclear waste storage sites are hemorrhaging radiation 24/7 into the environment. Nuclear waste splits atoms forever. So wherever you put it, any local area is going to be hideously radioactive. The sisters sued several entities that handled the waste, bringing negligence, strict liability claims, alleging that the defendants failed to manage and dispose of the radioactive material safely. Well, you can't do it. It's always splitting atoms. You can't contain it until it cools down enough. You can put it in a so-called cask, but a lot of these casks are vented, and they won't contain it for very long because the Wagner effect will break down the integrity of any kind of material that you use. You can't actually contain it. Defendants removed the tort action to federal court, arguing the plaintiff should have brought the claim as a public liability action pursuant to the Price-Anderson Act. And the Price-Anderson Act has been used to bludgeon humanity. It shouldn't exist because the industry's liability is catastrophic. Like, it's hard to comprehend what I'm saying, but if you're new here, then you need to watch the video of last night. And careful, because we accidentally started off with a too loud volume. But within a few seconds, I think that's the first time it had happened in the last decade to me. The Price-Anderson Act was established a federal indemnification liability regime to encourage private nuclear development. So they took the liability away, or gave it to a minimum, and then that hopefully was going to encourage the nuclear industry to build reactors because, first off, you can't contain the emissions. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor in the first year, you take about 1/3 of it, and you're going to put it in a fuel pool. The fuel pool will shield gammas, neutrons, betas, alpha shine, stuff like that for the local employees, but it's going to boil off 120,000 liters a day. That's going to go up to tall, skinny stacks. And each of those liters, hundreds of trillions or even trillions of trillions of anthropogenic man-made atoms. Who knows how many atoms it takes to boil a glass of water? I don't know. It's an extraordinary number. It's like a Google-type number. So how many atoms does it take to boil a glass of water for 1 million people every day just for breakfast? You're talking about more atoms than all the grains of sands and all the beaches on the planet and all the stars in the known solar system for just 24 hours. And you're going to release that. Once you take the fuel out of the reactor core and put it in a fuel pool, there's no containment. It's still splitting those atoms just as vigorously. And there's nothing on the planet with an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. You get a single atom in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells. It pulses energy in your body, it's crashing through your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells, there's permanent lesions to your organs, which you're talking about catastrophic health implications for that. But you're guaranteed to get sick from that exposure. And your immune system is compromised because you're trying to repair the damage every second from the explosion, from the Beck roll, from the detonation of the physical atom. And because there's so much out there now, there's nobody with just a 1 and 2. It's catastrophic to everything with replicating cells. And we're seeing an extinction event post-Fukushima, mass acceleration of all species. The food chain is broken, right? And there's nuclear shouldn't exist. Following removal, the plaintiffs amended their complaint to assert a public liability action. So this is the legalese, but this is really interesting stuff. The 3rd, 6th, 7th, 9th is really important for what we do. And the 11th Circuit had all found that applicable non-regulatory commission, I call them it's Nuclear Regulatory Commission. I call them non-regulatory because that's what they really do. They're a non-regulatory disguised as a regulatory agency. Right, they're captured. Regulations supply the duty of care, displace state tort law claims is inconsistent with the statute. Yeah, but they created that whole cluster, right, to get away from the liability. Price-Anderson should never existed because there's no incentive not to be evil. You got to have an incentive, right? And because they're hiding away beyond corporate personhood, right, then you can't put them in jail. So there's no incentive not to be evil, no incentive not to poison your air, your land, your water for 1 billion years. So Price-Anderson is the biggest, is threatening everybody because they have immunity from prosecution. They should never be on the stock market. They shouldn't have corporate personhood. They shouldn't have access. And corporate personhood, of course, is an illegal amendment to the slavery law. Justice Hugo Black, the Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, I'm not sure, I think it was the 30s, had wrote an eloquent dissent of how absurd it was that a law meant to free slaves from an oppressive government was going to be used by corporations to oppress the sovereign people, which is the people of the country. If you go back and look at the original declarations of the Constitutions, the Bill of Rights to Magna Cartas, then you would only tax corporations. That way the government wouldn't get too big. When you start giving corporate personhood, so now the corporations, they don't pay state, federal, local taxes. All that money goes in offshore accounts, and you can't tax. But the idea of taxation was for corporations so they didn't run out of control, and there was a charter, so there would be checks and balances. They can be held accountable. Their company could be liquidated to pay restitution of outstanding debt and to mitigate the damage that they caused, and they could be thrown in jail. So there was an incentive not to be evil. There is no incentive not to be evil, and that's the way that's how they work. That's their corporate personhood laws. Well, we'll get a fine, we'll pay the fine, but it doesn't matter because we didn't pay state, federal, local taxes. We put that money in offshore accounts and then use that to bludgeon the country into submission and to poison the population and litigate and harass anybody that spoke about it. I mean, look what they've done to me over the years. Holy shit. Gag orders. How many people I got on my show tonight? 15 people. A show I've been doing for a decade. Probably the most important topic in human history on top of that. The 8th Circuit parted ways with a sister circuit, concluding the Congress intended to allow state tort law standards to apply. Left unresolved, the circuit split subjects. Now, I'm not a nuclease. I'm not a legalese expert or even an amateur. But I know that the basic foundations of things. And so you can extrapolate a lot. You can't extrapolate everything, but you can certainly extrapolate enough to know that the Price-Anderson Act is a disaster for all the species, because there's no incentive for the industry to be reasonable. The circuit split subjects nuclear energy providers, waste handlers, transportation companies, and contractors to a patchwork of nuclear liability standards. A company operating a nuclear facility handling radioactive material in Missouri, Minnesota, within the 8th Circuit, cannot depend on compliance with federal regulations to shield him from liability. And by contrast, this shield would remain available to firms operating in places like Illinois, Pennsylvania, or California. So you're expecting the Solicitor General to respond in about 4 months. And then the parties will have the opportunity to follow responses. The nuclear industry typically wins all of this because they have very deep pockets. And the people challenging them are not savory to, the nuclear industry have 1,000 public relation firms, right, to protect them and to promote them. United Nations have many subsidies. They have IRPA, the IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. They have UNSCLEAR. They have, but basically the same people on each committee on top of that. But because there are 195 countries, right, that have been captured by this invader, then that is used to bludgeon a lot of the participants in the regulatory agencies. They're captured. They don't even get a job unless they're already captured. The company will develop advanced high-temperature superconductors. Tokamak Energy joins fusion initiative. Another scam. There is no fusion. Like the big advantage, recent advantage in fusion. It's just hang on. We'll get it. We'll dig it up here in a minute. And tritium recovery. Well, tritium is really important for bombs. You can triple, quadruple the intensity of the explosion by just using a few grams of tritium, which, according to the industry, is harmless. But it's organically bound. It's not harmless. It's got a 120-year lifespan. It pulses energy at speed of light every second. There's an autoimmune trigger in your body for the rest of your life from it. It's man-made, and so therefore you don't have an autoimmune trigger to defend against it. This was another $128 million initiative aimed at accelerating core fusion energy science technology. As part of the university, they're hoping to develop advanced superconducting tapes designed to withstand neutron irradiation. So, like, one of the questions I got is, they built the world's biggest magnet, right? So imagine using the world's biggest magnet to spin motors, to spin generators. Can you imagine how many generators you can spin with that magnet? Right, think about it. You can power cities. Fusion, why are you putting endless, retarded, absurd amount of resources and precious metals and everything else into fusion when you have geothermal? You don't have to spend 70 years trying to find a way to make it work. It's here, it's sitting there, it's right under everybody's feet. There's all kinds of new drilling technology, like 25,000-pound jets will split the rocks, will slice the rocks up for the drill bits. Pneumatic hammers then will pulverize it, and then they'll shoot water in there and vacuum that up at the same time. And then the drill bit will go down through that. When it hits an obstacle, the same process starts again. It's 4, 5, 6 times quicker than the top-of-the-line conventional oil well drills or fracking drill techniques, right? Quasi Electric can use a system that basically dissolves the rock with, I'm not going to say lasers, but somewhere in that category, right? Designed to withstand neutron irradiation because, first off, you're talking about 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And then the neutrons that are created there will destroy the integrity of anything that humans can build. And so they're trying to use the world's biggest magnets to keep the fusion itself in the center of the containment, because if it touches the walls, it could blow up. Imagine 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures touching metal or something like that. What's going to happen is going to vaporize it. And these are pressurized systems. So you got 1,000 pounds per square inch. If you vaporize a hole into it, you got a big vacuum chamber exploding now with enormous pressures, like reactor 3 at Japan. Let me bring up the bizarre fusion. Because we covered this a few days ago, I'm pretty sure. The thing is, we cover so much in 1 week. It's absurd. We go after every subject. There's nothing we shy away from. When it comes to nuclear, right? We're very interested in everything to do with. Let me try this again. There we go. I think this is the one. Oh, this might be the one I was looking for the other day. Yeah. There we go. We got one up anyway. You don't need fusion, you have geothermal. Anything that fusion might do, that hasn't been able to do, by the way, for 70 plus years. Yeah, fusion is the craziest story you're ever going to come across. My problem with like fusion doesn't work, so it doesn't exist. Neither does small modular reactors. Neither does neither does micro reactors. Geothermal exists; it's everywhere. So the first time they got fusion to produce power, more power than they put in. Historical net gain last year. And what they were talking about was they produced enough net energy, so they put all this energy in to get the fusion to start, what they call the trigger. And then this was only milliseconds, right? It's 1,000 rather of a second or something. And then there was enough power to power New York for a millisecond or whatever, 10 million people. And so then they produced enough power to count for that, to put that back into the grid. And then they produced a little tiny bit of extra energy. And that's what the big whoop whoop was all about, that extra energy. So the year before this, it was equal to enough energy to power a 9-volt battery. Now you're talking about 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. 270 million degrees. They're going to boil water. So how much water can you boil at 270 million degrees that you could quantify that you had a net gain enough to power a 12-volt battery, which is not, static electricity would probably power 100 Tesla cars, fully charging, for instance, even on a bad day. They said the net energy gain was equal to enough extra energy above what they put into it and got back. The extra energy was equal to a 9-volt battery. And I mean, it's the most strangest. There's no way to quantify that. But the stock market just sold out all the stocks right away. The energy produced in December 2022, the year after, released 3.50 megajoules, enough to boil around 10 kettles of water. You're talking about 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And the energy, extra energy you were left with was equal to 10 kettles of water. And then we were covering one a couple of days ago where they equated it to 2 Mars chocolate bars and 6 kettles of water. That's how much extra energy they got. And this multi-billion dollar machine with all the precious metals from Asia and Canada, United States. So it's a total, like how much water can you boil at 270 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures? This is a question I can't find an answer to. And so you had to get the energy, convert the energy back to replace the energy you used, and the energy left over was enough to boil 10 kettles of water. So what kind of idiot or moron in the university wrote this story? I don't know. But stocks went crazy because they just shoved this out to do with any. If somebody says they like nuclear, if they can get a so-called, like a sports icon or any kind of sports icon, musician icon, or any kind of Hollywood icon, so-called icon, to say they like nuclear, the stock market goes nuts and tries to push stocks into all the unsuspecting investors with the intentions to rob them. The intentions is to rob them. So high temperature soup, like you hear this version of, if we can crack this code, we got it. And we've been listening to that I've been listening to it for 24 years. High temperature superconductors are key to building the powerful magnets needed for commercial fusion. The magnets they need are the biggest magnets on the planet. If you took those magnets and applied them to generators, you would probably produce more energy than the fusion would. Like it's a total fable. Why are you doing any of it when you have geothermal everywhere on the planet? It's under everybody's feet all over the planet. And just because you don't have the so-called technology to drill through a lot of Earth's so-called material, like granite and stuff like that, you could, if you spent just a fraction of a percent of the money you waste on small modular reactors, on micro reactors, on fusion reactors, which don't exist. If you took the money from each, you're talking about around 300 companies that are trying to crack that, allegedly trying to crack that riddle. We don't see any proof of it. They look like they're milking the investors and milking the industry and displacing any real technology. Right? They're holding up real technology. And because the grid was slowly co-opted to only accept nuclear power, even if you develop really cool alternative energy, you most likely won't get access to the grid because it's not designed. A nuclear power plant, by the way, it needs two gas oil and coal plants to run. It can't run on its own power. Neither can fusion. And fusion's byproduct of tritium-3H, and it's so rare to hear him use the word 3H. They literally disappeared that part of the acronym from the word, from the description, just before Japan allegedly said they're going to start dumping into the ocean, which is a ludicrous assertion. They've never stopped dumping it into the ocean. You can't put the stuff we're talking about in tanks because it's fuel particulates. Fuel particulates will gather up in the bottom of the tank, gammas, neutrons, betas, alphas, splitting atoms at the same time. You're going to have a criticality, a chain reaction will burn a hole through the tank. And because the water we know is multiple sieverts per liter, 3 sieverts is a lethal dose, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts of just beta per tank. So the tanks can't do that. They're empty. You wouldn't be able to build another tank on the site if you'd done that. Because the tanks would have to be 6 to 12 foot thick lead in order to shield anybody on the site. We're talking about Fukushima at the time. But like, look at the resources they can bring to bear for their kooky ideas. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Savannah National Laboratory, Idaho National Laboratory, Princeton Plasma Physics Laboratory, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, University of Tennessee. That's just a fraction, by the way. So Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Savannah River, Idaho National Laboratory, Hanford, all of these sites have one unique attribute. They're built on the biggest aquifers in that part of the country that feeds 10 to 20,000 farms each. And they're incredibly contaminated because they're on these national laboratory sites where they get permits for anything. So in other words, like, it's illegal to use plutonium mixed oxide fuel in reactors in Canada and the United States. But the national laboratories can get permissions, they can get permits to produce it. And the production of it is so catastrophic, there's so much releases, there's such a catastrophic amount that the people should be on death row that are doing it. That's how, like, killing hundreds of millions of people by making them sick in increments over years and decades it's not illegal to poison you with radiation. Right? Congress doesn't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Neither does Parliament in Canada or Britain or New Zealand or Australia. Neither does the Diet in Japan, which is the equivalent of the Congress for parliaments. They don't have the authority. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has the authority. They're all appointed by each administration for the 4 years. After 4 years, if there's a new administration, new president, new prime minister, they'll appoint a new bootlicking lapdog, somebody that's got a legacy of being just cruel to humanity and the species and the environment, and put them in positions of authority. Yeah. We're back to square one. Nuclear manufacturers fear return to phase-out policy. It's one of the best stories today. There's a lot of good stories today, though. There's a lot of fantastic stories today. This is South Korea, clearly. And we know this guy. We covered him quite a bit. We'll get to him, right? The author. I'll show you the author. This media, you're most likely familiar with this because we cover it. We're back to square one. Nuclear manufacturers fear return to the phase-out policy in South Korea. Right? They had a corrupt politician, a former lawyer, Yoon, who's got arrested for sedition for declaring martial law in the country because protesters wouldn't stop protesting. So he declared martial law to try to get rid of them. That backfired on him. Next day he was in jail and stripped of his presidency, which is pretty unique, right? I didn't know. There's not many countries that can pull that off. South Korea apparently, and rightfully so, had that particular attribute. As the South Korean new government signals another pivot away from nuclear power, small reactor part manufacturers in cities fear a return to the bleak years of the previous phase-out policy, warning the industry can't survive policy whiplash every election cycle. Oh, that's so sad. You sick and twisted, demented. There's nothing I can do. We're back to square one. We had hoped that things were finally looking up, and now the government has changed. We're back where we started, and I really don't understand why nuclear energy is so swayed by politics. Well, because it's evil, stupid. Climate energy minister. Climate. Such a strange. Climate minister. Yeah, you're going to fix the climate, are you, moron? Many fear a repeat of the Moon administration's 8th basic plan. Well, the reason the climate is so wonky is you can trace all the die-offs, the mass species extinction, the cancer epidemic and clusters to the nuclear industry. Pre-nuclear industry, we had an incredible diversity on this planet. Absurd amount of species. The skies were amazing. The species was incredible. And all the open-air nuclear testing, even the underground testing, is all vented at incredible speeds back into the biosphere. The underground testing splits the Earth open every single time. If you go watch the old videos, they're available on YouTube, of the nuclear testing, you see that underground testing era. It always splits the Earth, and you see this big plume coming out of there at thousands of miles per hour. Many years repeated the Moon administration, 8 basic plan, which scrapped 6 new reactors, halted the extension of 10 aging ones. It was effectively shut down despite being cleared for extended operations. Yeah, we celebrated that. It takes 15 years to build a nuclear plant. Even if we had land and safety measures in place, I don't see it as realistic. At a press conference, Merck in these first 100 days in office. So that's quite the punch in the guts for the nuclear renaissance, and a lot of the propaganda, a lot of the stock market narrative was based upon South Korea producing reactors, and that would create a need for uranium and everything else, right? It's vicious industry. It's just a hateful industry. And the industry can only exist because of those particular attributes. Some who exited the nuclear industry feel vindicated. If the business landscape changes every 5 years, how can anyone invest? They're basically telling us to shut down. Oh, poor little baby got shut down. I'm so sad. Not. You should be in jail, you disgusting parasite. You murders. These are serial killers. That's what nuclear is. It's a perpetual disease factory. The emissions from the fuel pools should be described as a disease factory, as a biological weapon. You can't contain it. It's always splitting atoms into the environment. If you could see it, you would try to build a rocket and get off this planet. If this continues, South Korea's nuclear sector could lose its technological edge and simply fade away. No, that's exactly what's going to happen. You don't have a technological edge. What are you talking about? Your design is based on one of the oldest designs we got. I can say something bigot, prejudiced, biased, and racist right now, but I'm not going to. I'm better than that. Not really, though, but... We lost half our workers, and finding skilled ones now is like finding a needle in a haystack. There's some emission right there, baby. It's bye-bye nuclear, because they're dependent upon South Korea doing contracts. So all the contracts they had worldwide, right, these fake memorandum of understandings, and that's what we call them the whole time, are now all kaput. They're all like the dodo bird, which means that's great for 8 million species. It's too late for all the whales. They're all emaciated. Most of them will be gone next year. All the gray whales will be gone next year. The 13,000 that are left now were emaciated last year on their migratory, 12,000-mile migratory route. The food chain is broken. They're the second biggest whales on the planet. All the humpback whales are emaciated. The mink whales are all emaciated. Killer whales are all emaciated. The covert beak whales, all emaciated. But guaranteed, the gray whales will be gone next year. Right? 12,000 miles to Baja, California last year on a southerly migratory run. No babies survived it. They were too weak to have babies. They had maybe 80 out of the 13,000 that are left. 14,000 died post-Fukushima. Majority of them was starvation. The food chain is broken. It takes a long time for a whale, a big whale like that, to lose 12 inches of blubber. They've lost it. There's no way they're going to make it to the northerly. And when they get there, there's not going to be any food. What do you think is going to happen? The world is going to have to come. You can't just keep with the garbage can diagnosis of climate change. You got 80 years of emissions. Gas, oil, and coal emissions is more trees, more plants, more insects, more birds, more puppies, more pizzas. Radiation attacks everything with replicating cells. And it pulses energy at the speed of light every second and never goes away. So all the emissions for the last 80 years are out there pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And they're assimilated in everything. We wiped out the biota. We wiped out the bacteria, the fungus, worldwide now. And this is why we're seeing the flash floods. This is why we're seeing the forest fires. The Earth is not soaking up water anymore. It's soaking up heat. I mean, there's a few, oases left on the planet, but not much. And they're not complete. 2 trillion won lost to fear-mongering politics. Oh, poor baby. This rat right here. We've covered him too many times. If they ever bring the death penalty to South Korea, this guy should get it over and over and over. The author is the editorial writer at the June Ang Libo. He's a really worker art, this guy. According to recently released National Assembly data, South Korean government spent 2.35 trillion won, 1.6 billion US dollars between 2021. What a scam, eh? 2021 and August this year to monitor and respond to Japan's release of treated. You can't treat the water from a nuclear meltdown. It's full of fuel. You can't filter that. It's absurd to suggest you can. Because the filter is thousands of sieverts in the first hour, which means you can never get back in the building. You can never get near it. You can never change the filter. And that the 2 or 3 sieverts a liter you're putting through it, when it comes out the other end, is going to be 10 or 15 sieverts. You can't filter radiation. Radiation is not like oil. It's not like sediment, right, from the water filtrations from the reclamation facilities for your water plants. Yet over 2 years following the start of the discharge, it's such a dishonest. I'm going to show you headlines to counter that. I just got to show you a picture, though, of how ridiculous that assertion actually is. They don't show you pictures, and there's a reason. The picture they do show you got nothing to do with the topic. So this is just a fraction of a major media, the biggest media in North America, CBS, the biggest media in Europe, BBC, the biggest media on Australia, on Australia's continent is ABC Australia. CNN, of course, is global. That's just a fraction of media. I made this picture 12 years ago, rather. 13 years, maybe. Well, that picture's from 13 years ago. And they're claiming they're 150 feet above the stump to your left, which is 9 reactors melted down. They're all gone. The fuel pools were at the very top of the building. Humans can't survive that environment because your organs melt in about a minute or two. It doesn't matter how stoic or brave you are. You're not getting drunk and singing songs at the bar ever again. So the reason they faked all that is because the inventories were lost in the first 6 days. They lost all the inventories in 6 days. But 12 years later, they're allegedly going to take the fuel out of the pool of a building that doesn't exist. This was 2013. They're claiming they're on top of the building getting the fuel and successfully got the fuel out of the pool. So he said South Korea wasted $1.6 billion between 2021 and August of 2025 to monitor and respond to Japan's water. And they call it treated wastewater. It's not wastewater, it's nuclear waste. Can't call it water anymore. Yet over 2 years following the start of the discharge in August, 99,000 radiation tests conducted by authorities found not a single case exceeding the safety limits. They increased dramatically. America went from just 100 to 1,000 or 1,200 atoms per kilogram. In effect, more than 2 trillion won of taxpayer money was spent without uncovering any threat. Really? Because they're refusing to acknowledge that happened. That don't mean that it didn't happen. Here's I got some headlines from South Korea from the Time Machine. CC-137 hotspot detected in Seoul, South Korea, where he's too, by the way, at 1,000 times normal background radiation, which is catastrophic numbers. That's 1,200 kilometers from Fukushima. Fukushima disaster contaminated the territory of Japan, the Sea of Japan, South Korea, up to 8 orders of magnitude above global fallout background off the prefecture's coast. 2 trillion won lost to the fearmongering. Fearmongering. See, if you fill up these tanks, you're talking about 1.4 million sieverts of just beta that they acknowledge. You can't just have beta. You got gammas, alphas, neutrons, and betas, and you got fuel particles that are splitting atoms, settling on the bottom. You're gonna have a chain reaction. You can never stand up there. The tanks are empty. If you do got water in it, it's not water from the reactors. If you do that, you can't build another tank. And you can't never go near the tank. You can never decommission the tank. You can never tank the tank apart. You can't go near the hoses. You can't go near the pipes that are going to the tanks and to the filtration facilities. You can't walk alongside of it. Lethal doses. Unless they're 6 feet thick lead or more, you can't be in proximity. And because it's 100%, everything was lost in the first 5 days, for goodness sakes. By lost, I mean buried the whole planet in catastrophic radioactive fallout. If you're not familiar with this stuff, you need to watch the show from last night. Was actually a really good show. A very informative show. A show that will give you incredible insight that is very unusual. One of my better moments. I can be a bit of a hard case sometimes. That's where I get the big numbers. I got 10 people on my show now, see? Can't get those big numbers without. There's nothing wrong with preparing for radiation. The question is whether the government's response is based on scientific reason and proportional to actual danger. Let's have a look at it. So they're claiming that this never happened, that there was no adverse side effects from any of it, which is criminal. It's not illegal to poison you with radiation. It's the only reason they're able to get away legally with what they're doing. La 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 la. Medical procedures like X-rays, CAT scans emit radiation, but their benefits outweigh the risk. If the mother has 2 X-rays when the baby is in the womb, the baby has a 50% chance of being dysfunctional. But it's going to be dysfunctional anyway, first off. The benefits, like whatever you can do with an X-ray or a CAT scan, you can do with lights and algorithms and computers. Way better, with no adverse side effects whatsoever. The reason X-rays and CAT scans, like the X-ray machine, for instance, you know when they put this a lead belt, so to speak, right? This lead apron, rather, on you. The X-ray machine calibrates itself automatically to shoot through it. So you're getting the worst dose conceivable. You're getting a catastrophic dose. And they don't want them to use it no more, but people just won't listen. They keep using them. There's been an incredible amount of harm done by X-rays on top of that and CAT scans, which is why they are routinely used. Now, they're routinely used because it's not illegal to murder you and poison you with radiation. Congress doesn't have the authority to make it illegal. If it was illegal to poison you, wouldn't be able to use X-ray and CAT scan machines. By that logic, the Fukushima discharge was never as alarming as it was made out to be, according to most scientists. By that logic, the Fukushima discharge was never as alarming as it was made out to be, according to most scientists. So you're saying this doesn't qualify as alarming. You had 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the 4 buildings, 36 reactor cores, including the reactor cores. Each of them were pure uranium, pure plutonium. Chernobyl was a graphite reactor. It was a new reactor. It was a small reactor. It was still brutal. But these are massive reactor cores. Chernobyl didn't have fuel pools at the top of the buildings. These are 30-year-old buildings with the inventories at the top of the buildings are gone. Each reactor core was probably 100 Chernobyls because, well, reactor 3 was different. It was the plutonium X-oxide reactor was already gone through a chain reaction, which is considered the ultimate crime against humanity and the species, is to produce that type of material. And then once it comes out of the so-called containment, it's not 100% containment, then it's still splitting atoms for millions of homes and businesses. The fallout, the single atom fallout from a nuclear fuel pool or nuclear waste, the splitting atoms, is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So, and it's forever. It destroys your chromosomes, your DNA, your cells. It does it every second for your entire life, according to most scientists. What was interesting is they closed 130 schools in Korea after Fukushima because of radioactive fallout. I don't know why that's there. My old channel had 23,800 subscribers. They took it down when I was out looking for spiders. This one, I basically never gets subscribers ever. This channel. Fukushima is getting more serious. North Korea TV. Wow, really? We see no prospects of getting radioactive leakages under control. Well, how do you call that leakage? How do you quantify that as calling it leakage? North Korea state television reported the seriousness of the continued radioactive leakage. What is more serious is that even a month after the accident, we see no prospects of getting radioactive emissions under control. And there is the possibility that unexpected radioactive substances may hemorrhage out of the plant. Well, I don't know how it can hemorrhage out when the building is perfect. Look at that. There's no holes there for it to get out, Dana. You're right. The reactor cores and fuel pools were 150 feet up. And when you look at the guts hanging out of these buildings, you don't have to be an architect or an engineer to comprehend that there's nothing left. Fukushima worker warned, get out of Japan before spring. Radioactive pollen will spread again. Radioactive material from reactors is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poisons. And the harm caused by nuclear disaster greater than any work of man other than the atomic bomb. And top expert says the radiation is like explosions going off in your cells, blowing holes in your DNA, your chromosomes, causing permanent lesions to your organs. 50 atoms a kilogram is permanent lesions to an adult or an elephant or a whale. You'll initiate a cascade of biological responses that can go on forever. You get long-term immune dysfunctions. If you inject flu viruses into the mice that are irradiated, it will kill the irradiated animals. In normal animals, this isn't the case. So the immune system is compromised, so-called, for a long period of time. Well, they're compromised forever. Cesium-137 pulses energy 600 feet. So it's horrific. Concept is that we're generating damage, which is a cascading forward. Radiation is not just a powerful toxin, it initiates signaling cascades that are taking place. Well, what happens is what we know from Fukushima, for instance, is, you got one study with 13,646 out of 38,200 children. So you had 13,646 with tumors of 2 centimeters. Under thyroid gland. The thyroid gland for a child is about 2 centimeters. The thyroid gland produces the hormones for all the regulatory functions of the body. And it supplies the pituitary and the adrenaline with hormones too. So now they're replaced with man-made radioactive hormones. It's a gamma emitter. And so, but in order to have a gamma emitter, you got to have a beta or a neutron. And these are bone seekers. So it's prudent to say and safe to say that if you're producing radioactive hormones, you're also producing radioactive stem cells. And for children and for baby species, baby animals, mammals, baby birds and stuff like this that are developing, and their bodies are not designed to run on anthropogenic man-made hormones and anthropogenic man-made stem cells. Right? And so there's a host of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries that'll manifest from that. So we got 8 people on our show tonight, do it? 8 people. They dropped a hammer on me a few days ago. I guess some of them caught my stream. They're like, oh shit, we gotta get rid of that guy. 162 views, that was pure luck today. 131 views the day before, 140 views the day before, 183 views. But typically it's a couple of hundred views is all I'm allowed. Now, all of a sudden, over half or 2/3 of the people don't watch my videos. Just randomly, right out of the blues. That's not what I'm being censored. The same people are watching. Their numbers are censored. Because that's what cowards do. And nobody's ever had an educational program before. And they're terrified of anybody that can articulate the issues. They're desperate for a nuclear renaissance. And hiding me is not going to change that equation, because I only got to convince the policymakers and the investors, right? That's all I got to convince. And the industry falls apart in those countries. And they're going to seek people like me out. But what they'll realize is that there really isn't anybody out there who's running an educational program. Nobody's ever run an actual educational program. And so, therefore, I'm a target. I got a great big target on me. Bring it on, baby. Censure me is not going to stop what we got done over the last 24 years. Right? It just makes it more desirable to hear what I got to say for the people in the industry. Like the policymakers, the investors who only hear one side of the narrative. And you're not going to hear the stuff I told you tonight unless you come here. You're not going to see the stuff I told you tonight unless you come here. You're not going to see the pictures I showed you tonight unless you come here. That's the only way the industry can survive right now. Now, South Korea is on its back kicking and screaming and crying. Officials unsure what to do next. South Korea called Japan's handling of Fukushima incompetence. Because that administration back there stuck it to the nuclear industry, and that's how they're phasing it out. And then the administration of Yoon, the prosecutor Yoon, who got arrested for sedition for trying to invoke martial law because of protesters against his corruption. He ended up getting arrested. And now the current administration now is anti-nuclear. So they got away with it for 3 or 4 years, and they put out this fake nuclear renaissance coming out of South Korea, where they did get contracts. They didn't have the manpower. They didn't have the trained people. They don't have the welders, thousands and thousands and thousands of welders they need. They don't have the supply chain. They were trying to, a lot of this is organized by the degenerate agencies, the IAEA, UNSCLEAR, IRPA, the IPRC, UN, all the UN little sadistic, little twisted monsters. They said the only radioactive material left is 1.2 million tons of the treated Fukushima water is tritium. Really? You can't treat water, right? This is how they treated the water. They pretended that everything was best kind and they were on top of the building and everything was being removed.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by...
That's BBC, Rupert Root, and Phil Hayes. And they all do the same thing where they're on top of a building that don't exist. And so that's how they're keeping the nuclear industry afloat, is by poisoning the entire planet, refusing to deal with what happened, refusing to try to mitigate it. 392 nanosieverts today in South Korea. Let's forget that happened. Let's conveniently forget all of that happened. South Korea bans 35 Japanese seafood products due to Fukushima radiation fears. And that was 2012. So imagine how many people they actually poisoned. Radioactive iodine detected in the seaweed samples by South Korea. Radioactive store-bought seaweed measured 0.81 microsieverts per hour. Now, because the machine they're using only measures gamma, you have to multiply it by 600 to get the real numbers. The total tritium content amounted to only about 3 grams. Really? So there's only 3 grams that got out of the 4 reactors and 8 fuel pools, is it? 3 grams. That's it. Nothing got out of those buildings, only 3 grams, and it's all in the 1,000 tanks, is it? If you go to my playlist, you'll find out I've done entire presentations on that stuff. And it's absurd to suggest that, like, to call it 3 grams is just the utter contempt for everybody except for themselves. These are real-life monsters. Plutonium-241 for Fukushima was 70,000 times more than atomic bomb fallout in Japan. It was around 250,000 pounds plutonium in the 4 buildings that have lost their entire inventories. 250,000 pounds. And you can burn this in incinerators at 3, 4, 5,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and all you do is liberate it back into the environment. You can't destroy it. It kills all the animals of multiple tumors. The majority of the tumors are going to be skeleton tumors from the plutonium. The plutonium fallout that covered the entire planet in less than 20 days. Right, it starts off as neptunium, and then 2.5 days later ends up as plutonium. And then first decay, which is 24,000 years before it decays again, it's a nasty isotope forever. And they used to say, oh, well, if it's a long half-life, then it's not as harmful. No, that's not true at all. That's the scam. If it's man-made with a long half-life, it retains its energy for its entire lifespan. The curium, by the way, isotopes, which is the biggest byproduct of the radioactive fuel rods, needs lead shielding 20 times thicker than plutonium do, and plutonium killed every animal in the experiments. Build up in the biosphere, which means the extinction event. Xenon, 133, 135 detection in South Korea may be from Fukushima reactor. Really? Really? Where else could it be from? A criticality or spontaneous fission of curium to blame. So this was an event in 2013 where there was a huge plume came in, which happened to be at the same time as there was a big earthquake right off the Fukushima plant, which has a lot of earthquakes because it's less than 100 kilometers from the tectonic plates. Why would you build reactors there for? With a 3,000-year history of 300-foot tsunamis. Why would you build it right there? Public concern over Japan's fish imports to South Korea looks to be justified. Contaminated seafood recently on sale in South Korea, adding to the fear. Over 6 million pounds since 3/11. Right, but you come over to the South Korean apologists, and they said the total amount they got out was equal to 3 grams. 0.1 ounces. Like the ELP system didn't work. It can't work. The Arriva system was the French government was exactly the same as the ELP system. They didn't even turn it on. It was built to get people, because you figured people would stop paying attention. They were like, oh, well, they got a system, right? There was the Siri system with an S and Curie system. Where they allegedly were going to separate cesium-137 because that's the cover story for emissions for 80 years. But the cesium-137 isotopes are the same size as every other isotope, every other atom. They're all the same size. How are you going to filter out one and not the other? It doesn't work that way. They're the size of an atom. We don't have filtration systems with those attributes. 3 grams. So saying only 3 grams got out of these buildings that don't even exist anymore. They picked up 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million. Because they lost their entire, around 6 million pounds per building. The industry is insane, and there's no one to hold them accountable. If we don't come out and bludgeon them once in a while, there's nobody to hold them accountable. So all you got to do is censor me. That's pretty easy. To click a button and walk away and never look at me again. Playing past the parcel with Fukushima 2016, 30 million tons will eventually be moved to a third-level interim storage facility. And the bags only last about 3 years at there. So 30 million one-ton bags were stored, and it looks like this, one-ton bags, 30 million. This farmer is harvesting food for sale in a nuclear wasteland where you can't live. For sale because he's not wearing his idiot paper suit. So it's for sale. In a nuclear wasteland. This is demented stuff. In 2019, just 3 years later, they still had 105,000 sites. 105,000 sites. And they were saying like these green sheets, and he would show you this picture. But the bags are actually round, not square, okay? It's a completely dishonest thing. And then suggest that 105,000 sites like this, when it's actually 105,000 sites like that. It's an industry, it's 105,000 sites like this. It's an industry of worms, of parasites that are spineless. These people are spineless. And they burnt 100,000 becquerels per kilogram. Now they're measuring cesium-137 with a 300-year lifespan. So none of the cesium that's on this planet has decayed away to something that was harmless. Everything that was ever emitted on the planet is out there pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And just because you can't see it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it or perceive it, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Yeehaw. I'm so glad today's my Friday, right? I stopped working today. I pick up again on Sunday. On Monday, I'm going to have the rest of my gear show up. So we're going to have the double Danas, hopefully, starting then. And I got no idea how that's going to play out. I want to look the part. I need to look the part to play the part. And you won't believe what I'm up to. It's going to be pretty awesome. It's going to be epic, I can tell you that much. I'm going to have a co-host, which is the alternate Dana. But as far as I know, he's going to be a pro-nuclear Dana. But he's going to be dressed the part, lab jacket and everything like that. And I'm gonna parrot the pro-nuclear scum that we're used to, right? And then me, Dana, the real Dana, not the alternate Dana, but the live Dana, because all that will be pre-recorded, is going to calmly explain that that's not true. But that'll never stop the alternate Dana from saying it's like a banana and potato chip. I can guarantee you it's going to be entertaining. If not, I'll switch it up. So Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste. So radioactive fallout, high level. Minimum is 100,000 atoms per kilogram. It could be 20,000 atoms per kilogram. And they're unacknowledged in gamma, cesium-137 in particular. But there's zero possibility of actually checking. And you got 1 billion pounds. Each pound at those numbers is the animosity equivalent of a dirty bomb. And you can't destroy it by incinerating it. You just liberate it back into the environment. And the industry was like, well, no, all the radiation, because it's heavy, will sink and stay with the ashes. So you'd have your stuff on an atomic scale. With 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see them. So they think for a millisecond that those atoms are going to somehow magically stay in the incinerator. This is a vicious industry. Let's go back to this guy from South Korea. Tritium, annually on Earth, and it's about 5 grams fall as rain over the East Sea each year. We produce more tritium from La Hague in France reprocessing facility, and Donneray in Scotland reprocessing site, and Windscale, now known as Sellafield. In just the first couple of years of the Manhattan Project era, then the entire, I think it was around 1,100 pounds of tritium worldwide at that point, throughout the millions of years of aggregation. And it's got a 120-day lifespan, 12-year lifespan. 120-year lifespan, rather. And that's a different tritium than the anthropogenic man-made tritium. They're completely different. A man-made tritium is 3H. So it's very dishonest to use the word tritium without using the word 3H, because that's what they mean. In such a vastness, a few grams of tritium are diluted beyond significance. Well, none of the studies showed tritium fallout. There were 6 million pounds of fish that were sent back to Japan, not because of tritium, because of plutonium, uranium, and americium, and neptunium, and strontium, and all the other isotopes. Still, what some call fear-mongering politics led to enormous waste of public funds. So this is the industry drowning, right? And they're coming out and attacking anybody. They're trying to denigrate anybody's, legitimate concerns. Left-wing organizations declared that Japan was committing the worst environmental crimes in human history, suggesting radioactive fish would soon appear on the Korean tables. Well, they did. They sent back, on top of that, they sent back 6 million pounds in 2013. So the guy who wrote that story, the author of the story, is very sadistic. I mean, they protest it over and over and over. Any this cycle requires holding those who spread unfounded fears legally and politically responsible, yet in Korea such accountability is rare. Baseless claims fade without consequences. And so if I didn't come out and call out the author of this sadistic, fake, and dangerous article, no one would have. And those proven wrong rarely admit it. He'll never admit what I showed you tonight. Bad ideas, it seems, spreads faster than truth. You really got to be a sicko to do what he done and say what he said in that story. Like, there's a disconnect. That's an incredible disconnect to do what he done there. It's so dishonest. It's so dishonest. I'm going to put him in my... I'm going to put him in my hall of the lunatics, the crazies, so I can remember him. So Korea is such a strange stick, eh? So big censorship on me this week. Holy smoking goodness gracious. They disappeared me right off the planet. So we started with, if you join us later, we'd done the nuclear officer claims crew saw football field size UFO underwater. Just because, why not? Not illegal for me to do that. IAEA confirms Fukushima water safety. First off, they're not a regulatory agency. They don't have any authority over any country, any sovereignty over any country. They can't impose a penalty on anybody worldwide. And just let me give you some of that stuff first. International Atomic Energy Agency, this was 2023, August I think it was. It says the public trust the key to projects using radioactive soil from Fukushima. Well, why would you want to reuse? Why did you spend $48 billion picking up 30 million one-ton bags and now you're going to use it? This was UN's Anna Clark. The International Atomic Energy Agency, she said, is not a regulator. Think about that statement. So how can they be a watchdog if they're not a regulator, and therefore not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil recycling project, noting that the group's tasked to make sure Japan's plan is in line with their safety standards and disposal of radioactive waste. And they don't have any standards. Their standards actually are based on natural radiation, not man-made radiation, which is mind-numbingly dangerous and just unconscionable that they had done that. Right, so you got millions of people dying every year because they don't have an actual regiment of safety. The finding supports previous conclusions that the plant discharges poses negligible radiological risk to people and the environment. Workers dumping radioactive waste from Fukushima into the rivers. And we're talking about Naraha, Lydia, Tamura, all 13 locations. We were told to clean up only those areas around the measurement sites. Oh, they're doing a great job. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste. 100,000 becquerels a kilogram to be incinerated, 1 billion pounds of radioactive debris in a nuclear wasteland. 300 times more radiation released into the atmosphere from burning radioactive debris than claimed by the government. Like they've done literally the worst thing you can do. They've done the worst thing you can do. Government models showed Fukushima radioactive gas near Tokyo skyrocketed 10 billion times normal just after 3/11 when it happened. Very high concentrations recorded at all monitoring posts in the northern hemisphere. It was 220 million atoms to iodine-129 per liter in Canadian study. These are absurd numbers, by the way, with a 15 million year half-life. It was 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter, 1,500 atoms of sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs per cubic meter. There was xenon-133 at 1 million atoms per square meter on disposition radioactive fallout underground. There was all kinds of studies. I think we covered 11 different isotopes last night of catastrophic numbers. Fukushima Daiichi has contaminated the biggest body of water on the planet, well, all the water on the planet. All the water, all the trees, all the species, all the farms, all the insects, all the aquifers, and this is worldwide. It was a pulse event. So they've already done it for 80 years, for 70 years at that, 68 years or whatever at that time. Now you're past 70 years, 80 years rather, of emissions from, and now you got 1,000 fuel pools worldwide splitting atoms into your environment. Whole Pacific Ocean likely to have cesium levels 5 to 10 times higher than peak of nuclear bomb tests. It was way worse than that. It was completely symmetrical throughout the whole water column, from the ocean floor to the surface, and from the surface to the top of the biosphere. It's contaminated everything. Every glass of water on the planet is contaminated with radioactive fallout from 80 years of emission and a pulse event from Fukushima, Japan. It never goes away, it never stops pulsing energy. So when you're talking about 3,450 spent fuel assemblies, each assembly is 100 fuel rods. The fuel rods are 18 pounds, they're 12 feet long. So you're talking at least 6 million pounds per building. But the problem was you don't have a repository anywhere worldwide. So the dual fuel pools at the top of each of those boiling water 1 reactors are stuffed. They changed the laws so that you can pack more fuel into it because they don't have a repository. And it takes a long time before you can take them out of the pool. So you can count on at least 8 reactor cores at the top of each of the buildings because of the particular attributes. And then there's a lot of evidence to suggest the common spent fuel pool lost its inventory. It's across the street from reactor 3 and 4 I showed you earlier. And it's way lower. It's not as tall as the building, and it has windows. We know it was breached, which means they never had no power. They lost that inventory. If you go look up on my site 736 mystery pictures, you'll also see the redaction of the common spent fuel pool. And was mysteriously released in 2021, these 736 pictures. And then the number 6 reactor was completely pixelated out, and so was the turbine building. So why did they do that? And why did they release those pictures, wait 10 years to release those pictures? And why am I the only person on the planet to cover those pictures? Because investigative journalist doesn't investigate nuclear. It just doesn't work that way. High levels of radioactive material found in Tokyo. Slag is sewage that is dehydrated. So 170,000 atoms, we're only talking about cesium-137. They're refusing to acknowledge any other isotopes. And the biggest byproduct is the curium isotopes, not cesium, not iodines. Approaches levels found at Fukushima. I guess it does. You're talking about 36 million people. Well, these are catastrophic numbers we're talking about. And in sharp rise in iodine-131, levels at 3 Tokyo sewage plants meant an ongoing chain reaction because it has a short half-life. And it's a nasty isotope, and it doesn't travel by itself. Right? And in the ratios of iodines, there's 10 times more 132, 30 times more 133, 31 times more iodine-129. The 132, 133 are 9 times more effective ionizing and radiating the thyroid glands than the incredibly radioactive thyroid. Are 9 times more effective than the incredible effective iodine-131. I got lost in translation. British government deeply involved in a blatant controversies designed to manipulate the truth. Yeah, the British government, the Australian and Canadian government are brutal. They're just brutal jackals. They're brutal scumbag. Very effective attempt to calm the reporting of a true story. Oh yeah, very, very. Call for Chris Hume to resign over Fukushima emails. Now, what they done was just the universities in particular, in tandem with the media and the government, there was nothing too evil to say. We've covered absurd amounts of it over the years. I've produced over 300 of these presentations, 3,000 of these presentations. I've done over 600 radio interviews in the early years. I've done 6 years of research expeditions, 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean without coming home. Like, I've paid to do, man, and my body is paid to do, and I'm an old broken man now, and I still work very hard to try to keep this story pertinent and alive. But we will start to accumulate in large concentrations. Internal radiation doses of 80 microsieverts from eating 2 pounds of radioactive. These are catastrophic numbers. It's not microsieverts, it's physical atoms. See, microsieverts, millisieverts should be measured for materials like buildings and stuff like that. Fukushima released their inventory, so you had radioactive fallout of biblical proportion, and a lot of the fallout is splitting atoms. So wherever it ended up is just splitting atoms into the environment 24 hours a day. It's unbelievable what they've done to us. Japan Times, 2011. It's okay for babies to drink the radioactive milk because adults have potassium-40. Reactors don't make potassium-40. There's potassium-40s in everything, wherever they acclimated to it through genetic superior selection, right? You can get in a football field, fill it up with potassium, and you can sleep there for the rest of your life, and you won't get an ounce of damage to your body anywhere. It's harmless, it's innocuous, it's benign. You're already acclimated to it through genetic superior selection. And so they like to conflate these to confuse you. It's very effective. The previous cesium limits in rice in Japan was 0.1 atom a kilogram. So a becquerel is an explosion. But you got to have an atom, an isotope, in order to have that explosion, to have that becquerel. And it does it every second. And, like, you can't have just cesium. Wherever there's cesium, there's a stupid amount of curium. with a 250,000-year life. Now 1,000 times higher. So, first off, you can't just talk about cesium. And cesium-137, nasty, don't get me wrong. Pulses energy 600 feet every second. But you can't have one isotope without all the others. Frontline, PBS, Miles O'Brien, the one-armed bandit. Cheeseburgers and fries are much bigger risk to our health than cesium. So, I mean, this is unconscionable. Thank goodness someone chopped his arm off in Japan. Japan's 20,000 microsieverts for evacuation is extremely low. Happens to be 4 times higher than Chernobyl. So this is PBS had produced so much of that propaganda for the nuclear industry, and they're supposed to be a public broadcasting service. And they chose instead to cut everybody's throat that put any faith into them, which was millions of people loved PBS pre-nuclear meltdowns. Nuclear waste being processed during an explosion in France had radioactivity of 17 atoms a kilogram. 30 times less contaminated than what Japan considered safe to eat. But Japan only acknowledges, barely at that, cesium-137. They refuse to acknowledge any other isotope, any other gammas, neutrons, or betas, or alphas. That's criminal. But it's not illegal or poison, so it's not criminal, see? Food or drink produced in Japan may contain 2,000 atoms a kilogram of iodine-131, as well as 500 atoms a kilogram of cesium-137-134, for a total of 2,500 atoms a kilogram of radioactivity, and that is only accounting for those 2 isotopes. These are incredible numbers. Why would you allow people to drink like 2,000 atoms a kilogram of iodine-131 is catastrophic. First off, you can't just have iodine-131. You got every other isotope. It's heartbreaking that we destroy our planet and destroy all the species, all the biodiversity, all the biota, the ability to produce oxygen in our oceans and our fresh water. We busted the food chain forever, and now we see emaciated, all the species are disappeared or severely emaciated. Yeah, sometimes you can't rationalize this kind of evil. You just can't rationalize it. And one of the biggest, craziest things about nuclear is where they chose to build their nuclear plants throughout history. Almost every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms as far as you can see. It's on purpose to poison you, on purpose. The best way to lower the radioactive fallout from the fuel pools is to surround the plant with active farms. They get bought up by the big industries that target communities. So if they want to put a nuclear power plant in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, that has no nuclear, they'll ship all this food in there. Everybody's getting sick. Everybody's too weak to protest. Too busy getting radiation therapy that finishes them off. Radiation therapy is sanctioned murder. 2% survival rate past 5 years. That's murder. International Degenerate Agency confirms Fukushima water safety. Essentially, it's a machine that's washing radioactivity into the ocean. Fukushima is pretty close approximation of the China syndrome. The fuel core is burned through the containment vessels, mixing with the groundwater. Essentially, it's a machine that's washing radioactivity into the sea. It's infinitely worse than that. That's being pretty polite. Tokyo professor, every organism in Fukushima prefecture is contaminated with radiation. 1.4 million atoms per kilogram, 95 million atoms per square meter. These are incredible numbers. These are catastrophic. No humans should be in that environment. Nuclear waste in Tokyo, grocery store, which is 36 million people, metropolitan Tokyo. 2,700 atoms a kilogram of cesium and tea produced from Chiba, 20 kilometers north, 5 times the legal limit. I mean, this is madness, boy. And the industry doesn't care. It revels in this. It seems to. This is the agenda. It's an agenda to poison everything, every species, every bird, every mammal, every insect on the entire planet. Everything. Hello, everybody. Gamma shine mental illness vectors. James got the best one-liners, eh? Hello, everybody. You guys nailed it tonight. We're almost through. We're right there now. One Fukushima may destroy the whole country. One Fukushima may destroy a whole country. Collapse of a whole country is possible. Collapse of the entire biosphere is possible. And not only possible, it's actually happening. If you go look at my research expeditions, if you go to my playlist, you'll see videos I produced of current die-off videos. I'll just bring that up for a second for you. I'm everywhere, right? Hang on here. So if you go over to my videos and you go to blah, 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 playlist, and you scroll down, mass species die-off of whales, birds, and insects caused by Fukushima extinction event. View full playlist. And what you'll discover is these videos but James songs there sometimes. Whales, birds, insects going. I got a whole playlist for James music, but I'm going to make another playlist of my favorite songs. Whales, birds, insects going extinct. You watch that video, that'll wake you up in a hurry. And I provide you with all the documentation. Radioactive shrimp, whales, birds, insects, mass species die-offs. Fukushima meltdown caused a mass species event worldwide. Dead emaciated whales, birds, insects, etc. Mass species die-off. Each of these videos are about current die-offs that we are tracking. If you go back to the anniversary of this year, and I done 14, I think it's 14 videos, I can't remember no longer. 14 really good videos about the anniversary, like package. Each video is specifically targeting the crimes against humanity by the nuclear industry, and particularly Fukushima a lot of the times. That was an incredible amount of documentation. That was like hardcore. We decided it was the 14th anniversary. Let's hit them with 14 presentations. So I'm pretty sure, yeah, James got a song up there. And we started off with his song there tonight at the beginning of it. He's now at 445 videos, so he's got 430 songs. Try wrapping your mind around that statement. And the song we started off tonight was with James. And so he's got a new one, Getting Rich Off the Enrichment. And he's been censored really heavy, eh? Okay, so we'll see everybody on Sunday, hopefully. Hopefully I'm feeling good enough. Even if I'm not feeling, I'm probably going to do a show anyway, you know me. If we don't come out and denounce the nuclear industry, then nobody will. Like for an educational program, I just feel that I wish that the world had at least 5, 10, 15 people out there doing what I'm doing. And because we don't, that means I always got to work. It's not work. This is... I'm very privileged to do the things I'm doing here. They wouldn't have it any other way. They wouldn't trade it for anything. Have a great day tomorrow, next day, day after. Unless there's something happens, there'll be radio silence till Sunday. Take care.
Enrich it, baby.
Yeah, baby.
Private sector scheme.
Rotor gallery, stainless rows aligned. UF 6 feed through piping we designed. 30B lifted, overpack on chain. 48 wide staged in the tails domain. Clearance list fixed, status panels read true. Throughput framed as bookable value. Front end choke points, holders edge we own. We sell the work, no policy tone. 2390 keeps method unseen. Only outputs and timelines on screen inside each road of the lighter cut climbs. Tails bleed downward through parallel lines. Series and parallel raise assay range. Low single digits, the license domain. QA rewrite sets the route we tie. Special permit active, uranium ships out.
Getting rich off enrichment, baby. Spin that wheel, that money crazy. Private stock, chain expansion. Max that feed, no limitation. Getting rich off enrichment, baby. He kept flows, need a steady. Feed that flow, keep stages ready. We the market, cold and steady.
After Fukushima, capital step back. Waited the season, then returned to the track. Brazilians framing open runway space. Road shows booked, new rotor wings in place. Blue plus clearance, say band is raised. Rotor trains lift, percent investors praised. Import squeeze, reroutes, demand flows. Domestic offtakes booked across those roads. Pilot Halu bays under neutral white. Legacy Lou runs rolling day and night. Tolling rich, take a pay, keeps cash straight. Work units prezzled ahead of ship date. Filings marked, security narrow the scope. Public sees outcomes, never the core. Overseas secrets law pulled down the blinds. Capital rerouted, contracts reassigned.
Getting rich off enrichment, baby. Spin that wheel, that money crazy. Private stock, chain expansion. Max that feed, no limitation. Getting rich off enrichment, baby. Gate kept floors, need a steady. Feed that flow, keep stages ready. We the market, cold and steady.
Conversion tight, the queue defines time. Yellow cake waits for the UF6 line. Set tails, high you say feed, set low, burn work. Pick the right lever where the margins lurk. Staging yards, swell while briefing sell gain. Liability push to a later chain. Throughput first, everything else cued. Stewardship phrases on subcontract crews. Pilots and money chases front end steel. Investors rotate to the bottleneck deal. Two fuel markets closing their doors. Premium attaches to ours, not yours. Another road away, authorized to build.
Precision machines
Same
spin
play
at phenomenal
repeats at the
speeds,
quarters
separating
roll in.
isotopes.
Getting rich off enrichment, baby. Spin that wheel, that money crazy. Private stock, chain expansion. Max the feed, no limitation. Getting rich off enrichment, baby. Gate kept flows, need a steady. Feed that flow, keep stages ready. We the market, cold and steady. Getting rich